Yeah, can you see my screen now?
Yes, we can see.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So before starting, I just want to give a brief introduction on what I'm trying to cover this in this talk. So we'll be talking about basics of CNN, and then we shall move into implementing a CNN. I mean, a basic image classifier using TensorFlow and Keras, and that's how it's gonna be. I'll start with the basics of CNN, and then I'll go through the industry standards of CNN as of now. So that is what I've planned for the day. So let's start with what's an image, and how do we drive this whole topic is I don't want to drive this topic in a way which is mathematical. I mean, CNN can have multiple ways of explaining it. So instead of going to the math of it, it's better we go to the math, but it's better we understand what we're doing at first and what CNN is doing physically, and then we go into the math of it. So let's start with this. So what's an image? They say that image is worth 1,000 words, right? In fact, we should reframe it as image is as huge as 1 lakh words, and that's very practical. So if you see this, right? I mean, if you take a text, I mean, I think many of us in our BTech will start with text processing, and then computer vision. I mean, the field itself is much of a complex region that we don't want to introduce ourselves to. So we just say that this looks simple, and then let's not open to vision, because that is 10 times more complicated than text data. So I'll just go through the same jargon here. So if there is a text saying that a lady is crossing the road, and all I see is some 6 words, and there are 3 stop words. One is a, the second stop word is, the third stop word is the, right? So these stop words will anyways be eliminated, and after that we do stemming and then all the pre-processing. All we get is a 13 character sequence. Lady is what we take, cross is what we take, and road is what we take in the whole sentence. So if someone gives a text saying a lady is crossing the road, all I see is a 13 character sequence, and provided that you have taken an encoder like Unix or ASCII, it hardly takes somewhere around 34 characters to input this whole sequence to a neural network. 34 neurons in the input layer is all it takes for this sentence. But for say if the lady is actually crossing a road and you have taken a picture of that lady, and the image can be as, I mean, the images nowadays are of the size somewhere around 4K cross 2K and stuff like that. But if you take a training level sample, somewhere around 600 to 300 is a normal training level sample for any classifier. So if you take some 600 cross 300 image, it's a very small image. Even if you take that, and for every image you have something called channels. You have in an RGB image, you have red channel, green channel, blue channel, and all these intents is superimposed to get a picture. So when you see a picture, it is actually superimposed version of 3 channels of the same image, and under 3 channels. So if you see 600 cross 300, there itself you will have some lakhs of pixels, somewhere around 1 lakh 8, and then you have 3 channels on it. It becomes 5 lakh 40. So a lady is crossing the road in text sums is a 13 character sequence. When encoded, it becomes some 34 layer input neuron. I mean, input layer with 34 neurons. But when you talk about CNN, or a network which takes input as an image, then you need to have an input layer with 5,40,000 neurons, because every pixel value will give you some number. So when you see this image, right, I'll get that, but when you see this image, every pixel will give you some value, and that value is what we have to take in when you're talking about neural networks. All that matters is some matrix multiplications and all that numbers. So when you want to convert this image into a number, you get 5,40,000 numbers, and that itself is a humongous network that no one can train it. Even supercomputers can't train such things. So that is the reason why we need not a traditional neural network, but something CNN, which is modified form of neural network just for images, just not for text and stuff like that. Just for images, as I said, we have created something called CNN because of this very reason, because we get so much of data when we take at least a normal picture like a 600 cross 300. So what is an image? As I said, so if you see an image, it consists of 3 channels, and each channel will definitely have pixel intensities of the same width. So if you say 600 cross 300 is the image what you have got, then you have 600 cross 300 cross 3 values, because every channel may you have the same number of pixels, and all pixel intensities are different. So you will get 600 cross 300 cross 3 number of values when you can take an image. So that is the input size, and that is what matters in neural network terms. Image is nothing but image width into height into number of channels it has been taken. So if you talk about a grayscale image, then it will definitely have only one, channel. So you just have 600 across 300 values at your disposal. So now that we know what image is, and now we know how huge an image is. So what we see is just an image, but how huge it is what all that matters, right? So now you can understand even a small image is to some lakhs and lakhs. Comparatively, it is very very exponential compared to the text data. Reason why we need something more than what is existing in the neural networks domain, something which is not classical. Okay, so what is a classical neural network? You must have seen a classical neural network like an input layer, then you have a couple of dense layers followed by it, and then you have an output layer, and then you have the output class, probability using softmax or something. So that is what you can imagine when you talk about an image classifier. But what does convolutional neural network do? And the person who has created it, right? So what was his motivation from? So this whole thing, I mean, when you talk about, now we have to talk about more in a object detection or object classification kind of a perspective. So when this whole thing is inspired from mammalian cortex usually. So for say now you're seeing an object before you. I think you're sitting in a room, so look at some object. So this object may be table per se. So how do you recognize this as a table? I mean, leave about neural networks, leave about convolutional neural networks, leave about everything. When you see a table, how do you classify it as a table? You look at the edges, then you look at the four stands of it, and then a plain top region, and then you say that's a table, or it can also be a chair, isn't it? So these very things, I mean, the four chords or the plain flat table, is everything is a feature. So the features that you took when you classified the object which you are seeing right now as table were these four chords and one flat desk, and these are the four features, right? I mean, five features, that's what you have taken. Similarly, if you see a monkey or anything, I mean, if you see any object, you first start with the basic features, and then your visual cortex sums them up. So if you see some person, you see their eyes, nose, and stuff like that. All this becomes very valuable features to you. So all of this you club them. So if you see two eyes, then you say, hey, these eyes remind me of someone, isn't it? So the eyes itself are a differentiating factor. When you see eyes itself, you had a good amount of classes. I mean, when you talk about, suppose say you have some 10 of your friends, and you have seen some 11th friend, and he has got eyes which are a replica of some other friend. Okay, so what do you do at first is you take these features. First say you have created some imaginary feature map of these two eyes, and then what you do is to match this feature map of these eyes to whatever you have at disposal. That is how you do classification, or that is how you do detection. First say in the whole scene you need to detect a human. So what do? You see the human features, you club them up. So human features can start from strands of hair to the whole face, right? So you club the features. So there is something called a hierarchical clustering that happens when you talk about mammalian cortex. Whenever you see something, you just see lines at first. These lines will sum up to become shapes, and these shapes will become accumulated, and then becomes parts like eyes or ears and stuff like that. And then you come to a disposal that you say, hey, this eyes look like someone else from my class, or all that. So this is how even your brain works. Even all the mammals, right, they do this kind of thing. And when you see this v1 v2, so and also all the neurons whatever we have in our brain are classified as v1 v2 v4 just because of this very reason. So the neurons in the place of v1, they actually see only lines. So whatever the big scenery what you might be seeing, they might see only small lines, and then v2 region of neurons will just club these lines and become, and they make shapes. And the v4 part of the neurons will say, hey, the edges that you have summed up into shapes, they look like a tree, is what v4 says. And then the other thing says that this tree looks like the same tree back in my backyard. So that is how the whole flow is. So that is this is the whole reason why we wanted to improve neural networks, because it will be a computational explosion if you just feed dense layers into 5 lakh 40 input to some bunch of dense layers. It will be no computer can actually train such network. The reason why this is the whole motivation behind why convolutional neural networks, and how do they do that is by hierarchical clustering. And there are three things that they have taken from mammalian cortex. First thing is local connections. If you see the neurons in v1, right, they are interconnected. Unless they're interconnected, they can't communicate to themselves. For say, you need a tree, classifying a tree, you need some perpendicular lines, then you need curved, lines, right? So all these things should talk to each other and say, I'll club them and then call them a tree, isn't it? So this clubbing must happen. Only that clubbing will happen if you have local connections. Okay, so this is the first thing that they have taken from this whole concept of mammalian cortex and their motivation. First thing is the network should have local connections. Second, we need to have a layered approach. I mean, neural networks are always layered. We have layer 1, layer 2 and stuff like that. But this layering is most likely like a hierarchical thing where the weight matrices of first two layers will contribute to the second weight matrices as well. So that kind of layering is what they wanted to build. And third thing is spatial invariance. So if you talk about per se, you trained a net to detect a car or a pencil or a pen. So if you see a big scene, I mean, per se, you point at a desk and then the pen is very small in the whole desk. Even then it has to detect that pen, right? And first say you have only classified, you have trained your classifier based on good pens and better in better illuminance and better scale. I mean, if all your pens are the same size, so what happens when you point at a desk and the pen that you want to classify is very, very small in size? So it will not detect because it assumes that a pen should have this much of length in an image. So unless a pen occupies somewhere around 2 to 3 centimeters in the image, it is a pen is what it thinks, because we haven't trained it properly. The reason why we need something called spatial invariance. When you talk about text, we don't have anything called spatial invariance because whatever the size of the document might be, the word is still a word, isn't it? But when you see an image, when you move farther in the image, then you have a comparatively lesser size, and then when you move closer to the image plane, you have bigger sizes, isn't it? So whatever the size might be, or whatever the orientation, whatever the rotation, whatever it might be, we have to still classify that this very person or this very object is something. So for this very concept is called spatial invariance. So if you recognize a boat, you can recognize in any angle. So this is the third thing that they want to inculcate in the neural networks. So let us see into what is neural feature abstraction versus a classical ML approach for extracting these features. First, we are doing something called face detection or face verification per se. So what classical machine learning does is basically you design this parameter. You see this F1, F2 to Fk, right? This is a feature vector typically, and this feature vector is what you are using to determine if this guy is some Kamal or someone else. So what are the features you might take? So these features, right, these very features are engineered in classical machine learning. So no one gives you this inherently. Okay, you have to train this each of these features, and how you have to explain them, how explain the classifier, I mean the pre-processing part of the classifier, to know how do I find each of this F1, F2, F3 and up to Fk. So if F1 is something called roundness of face, you have to determine you have to fit a circle around the face of the object, and then you have to take things like diameter and centroid. So that itself can be 4 parameters, isn't it? And then distance between the eyes. So you have to detect eyes and the distance between them. So that can be some essential feature for you. So if the eyes are closer, then you might say that some animal, not a person who's standing there. Or if you're talking about face verification, then it's someone of a different person, not Kamal, maybe. You see, so all these features F1, F2, F3, Fk are engineered in classical machine learning. So we use features like, I mean, it's not true to get into SIFT and stuff like that and this part of the discussion. So it's better we say like I'm just thinking, sorry. Okay, so let us say we have an image and we have to describe it somehow. So we have something called global features, we have something called local features. Okay, so we don't need to engineer local features. We have algorithms to engineer local features. Like we have algorithms like SIFT, SURF and many things which can engineer these local features and give us valid point descriptors. But when you talk about global descriptors of an image like histogram orientation or something, all that things are readily there, are readily available. So that such kind of features is what we use for any machine learning classifier. So all this F1, F2, F3, Fk are just basic image processing outputs. So you pipe these image processing outputs, club them up and call them a feature vector. So this feature vector will have an information like how round is his face, what is the distance between his eyes, what is the length of his nose and stuff like that. So this is what a classifier uses to classify that this guy is some Mark or some Jack. Okay, so that's how it happens. when you talk about deep learning, this whole process, right, this feature extraction process, it happens inherently. And yeah, and that has to be done inherently. So how do we do that? So that is another challenge. So in neural network, this whole thing of feature, so now in neural networks, we don't really operate anything. So more likely a neural network is always a black box, and it's just that we know what it is doing and why it is doing the way it is doing. Simple as that. So it is more likely a black box. The reason why I'm calling it a black box is that you know the math of it, you know how it is achieving things, but you never know what kind of you can just see the feature maps. You can't act on them. You can't say take this and not take that. It will train based on the set of images that you have given, and you can just moderate them. So that kind of abstraction is what a neural network can provide you. And how this feature extraction happens is what we'll see in the next slides. But in neural network, just think that this whole point of feature extraction, this roundness of face, you don't need to specify anything to it. It will automatically train and learn that I know roundness of face is something which I have to take in consideration. Distance between eyes is something I have to take in consideration. It will do it, and even it and we also doesn't know that it is doing. Simple as that. So that is how feature extraction happens in CNN. And then when you talk about classification, classification is something like you have classifiers, right? You have built classifiers in your NLP course, or even in this course you must have built some classifiers. It is the same classifier. You have naive Bayes, you have decision trees, logistic regression, all that in the classical machine learning part. And in the deep learning part, you have a classification layer. That's it. So these are the two differences when you talk about a neural feature extraction versus a classical machine learning approach to deal with images. So when you see this, right? I mean, just to build on this, if you're doing something like an object detection, what in machine learning what you have to do is to this the very icon where I'm showing a person sitting over there is actually he's engineering the features per se. He's engineering the tire. He's saying that the roundness of the tire must be there, the diameter of the tire is some other feature, the chassis length is some other feature, and then some bonnet length is some other feature. That is what he uses to determine if this car is some Lamborghini or Maruti Suzuki. Simple as that. So this is what happens in machine learning part. So when you go to deep learning, it is just piping in. It does feature extraction, it does classification, it just gives you the output. So you don't have to do any feature extraction or engineering part when it comes to deep learning. And what these layers do, I mean, CNN has multiple layers which we'll talk in future, but what are these layers doing, and why do I need to bother about these layers, and what is the physical significance? So initially, as I said, it's all mammalian cortex. So initially, the first layer will try to understand shapes or edges. For say, if you see this image, right, this itself is very explanatory. So this is this kind of feature map. This what you're seeing is not a picture; it is a feature map. So this is the feature map that has been trained after some 1,000 epochs on on a very famous data set. So what it does is in the first layer, when you see the feature map, it looks something like this. So what are we detecting here? We're just detecting some edges, isn't it? And some curves. So these all we're detecting in the first layer. These are all the feature maps in the first layer. Then we see the feature maps in the second layer. So don't get confused when I say feature maps. Feature maps are just weight matrices. So when you have two layers, we have a weight matrix, right? So if you club all those weight matrices and assign some pixel intensity values to it, that matrix itself will look like an image. So every weight matrix, you club this weight matrix, you give, for say, if the weight matrix says I'm 225, assign 225 of gray, which is black. If you do all that, right, that matrix itself is a feature map that looks like this. So this is what we learn in CNNs. So whatever weight matrices, what we're learning is actually a part of an image, or something which enhances the image, or inhibits the image. So this is what we learn in the first layer. In second layer, he is learning something which is more complex. He is putting together two edges and saying, he is learning nose. And the neural network itself doesn't know it is learning nose, but it knows the feature map which can detect nose. Simple as that. And when it comes to interpretable AI or explainable AI, right, this is what we dig in. As data scientists, we dig into all these feature maps. We see why, for say, we have many misclassifications, right? So if you show a small kid, it will detect as shoe or something else of that sort. So what we do is to dig into these activation maps and see why is a small kid, when we pipe it through object detection network is, pointed as some shoe or something. When we see the activation maps itself will give you some amount of inference when why that misclassification has happened, something of that sort. So in layer 2, so we're learning mouth, we're learning eyes, we're learning nose and stuff like that. In layer 3, when you see, it's actually clubbing all of these things and making a face out of it. So if the first feature map is of some other person, second feature map is of some other person. So in and post layer 3, you can actually add output layer saying that if the feature map is fired up, if one feature map is fired up, then it is some mark. If second feature map is fired up, it's some Lisa and stuff like that. So that is how this whole thing happens, from edges cumulate to shapes, then cumulate to faces, or cumulate into shapes and stuff like that. So just to enhance this on this very point. So this is the same thing which I just showed. So this is the feature maps. All these things what you see here in the first thing are the weight matrices in the first layer. So if this is the input layer and this is your first dense layer, this you have a set of weight matrices, right? That you do a basic matrix multiplication. So this weight matrices will have some values, isn't it? Weight matrix is a matrix, and all those values when you bring them up and then give some grayscale intensities to them, the feature map itself will look like something like this. So all these feature maps are the feature maps of first layer. You see all the detecting is some blobs, some edges, some gradients. So that is all they're discussing. And when you go to layer 2, you see things like eyes, nose and ears and stuff like that. And in third layer, you see faces. This is what exactly our human brain does, and this is what they wanted to reproduce as a network. And this is how they have done it. So this is the end goal typically. So now we'll see how to achieve this. So whenever we say convolutional neural networks, right, we just confuse with the second diagram. This second diagram appears everywhere. I mean, literally everywhere. You just Google convolutional network. This is the first image that you see typically. And then you might have a question like, see, this is the neural network on the left side. What you see is what you can believe is a neural network, because you see neurons, you can see all the connections, and then you say, okay, this is a neural network. When you see the second part, whenever you try to learn convolutional neural networks or try to understand it, everyone shows you some boxes, and then they take some part of an image and they say a bigger box, and then comes a smaller box again, then comes a smaller box and stuff like that. So whenever you see it comes like a box kind of a thing, right? So we have three major questions when you see a CNN architecture. This is the basic CNN architecture. We do something called convolution, we do something called pooling, and we do it repeatedly, and this itself will give you some feature learning. Instead of doing HOG and stuff like that, instead of engineering features, that F1, F2, F3 to Fk is there, right? So that vector is, that is a vector there, but we'll get a feature map here. So that is inherently is happening by just repeating steps called convolution pooling, convolution pooling, convolution pooling with some activation. So this whole thing, right? When you try to break down this architecture, no one actually explains why are these boxes there the way they are, and why is this every time pooling becomes a lesser box and stuff like that, right? So there are three major questions. Why do I see boxes every time, and why not neurons? So if it is a convolution layer and it's a neural layer, then it definitely should have neurons, right? Why does it have a box? And secondly, why is only one part of the image taken? So when you see this, right, this is something called receptive field. And whenever you see any convolution neural architecture, right, they just talk about one part of the image and they just sum up the whole explanation. They don't say that that there is something called sliding window, there is something called region proposal and stuff like that. They just take you through one. If they show you an orange image, they'll take one part of it and then they'll explain the whole architecture, but no one says that we're actually looking into other parts of the orange as well. So that is the second thing, which a part of the image has been taken and then the whole architecture has been explained, but we don't really understand why is only a part taken and what is that actually, or what is that part actually doing. And the third question is, why do I need to do convolution, pooling and stuff like that with feature extraction? And what is its physical significance? So if you talk about convolution, anyone can say that, that's some dot product of two matrices and stuff like that. But why do we need to do convolution on something called an image data? And physically, when you talk about it, what is actually trying to do in physical nature is what, we'll bring in as of now. Just a moment, let's look at the time. Yeah. So first thing, so why do you see boxes every time when someone calls CNN and one shows you CNN, every time you see is all boxes. So why image is actually a box? When you this box is something called a feature map. So every box you see here is a feature map that you extract of after each layer. It's not that a CNN doesn't have neurons. It is not that CNN doesn't have connections. But in architecture wise, when you see an architecture diagram, they don't show you neurons like you see in LSTMs or RNNs and stuff like that. Here you only see boxes because we only talk about feature maps here. We only talk about the outputs of each neural layer. So when you see the first one, so why do I see boxes every time? The image itself is a box actually. So when you see, when I showed you the image, right? Image, when you see the first one, so this is a layer of pixel intensities in red channel, and then you have a layer of pixel intensities in green channel, and then you have in blue. So when you club all these things, this itself is a multi-dimensional array, isn't it? So it is an array of the size 600 cross 300 cross 3, which itself is a box, right? You got me? So image itself is a box which has a width of 3, which has 3 layers in it, 3 channels in it. So typically when you deal with a multi-dimensional tensor, all you get as outputs is a multi-dimensional tensor, and you don't get something called a vector. So when you see this image, right, it is very plain, it is linear. So when after every neural layer, right, you get something called a tensor, and that is a linear tensor. You get something n cross 1 or n, you'll get a tensor of the size n cross 1. So it is a linear vector. But when you talk about images, you get n cross n, which is a feature map. We don't call it a vector, we call it a feature map because it's a multi-dimensional. We have something called width as well because we're applying it for every filter through every channel R, G, and B. Reason why we don't see feature vectors, we call feature maps here. And second part, why is it only a fact that only a part of the image is always taken? That part of the image, whatever they take in is architecture diagrams, right? That is actually receptive field. So what we do, what is this receptive field concept is that, you go into a black room, a dark room, and then all you want to do is to search for edges and squares, because all that matters to the first layer after the input layer. Input layer is not called a neural layer. So when you talk about the first layer, right, first convolution layer, or first layer after the input layer, all it bothers about is actually to find some edges, some corners, and some gradients. So that is all it, that is all matters to it. So when it does that part, right, it actually needs to look at each corner, each thing locally. It cannot take the whole image at once and then extract edges and edges out of it, because it has to recreate such a feature map at the end of this whole feature extraction. It is not that we have to give the whole image at first. So what we do is we do something called a sliding window approach. So it's just like sliding window approach is just like you go into a dark room and you might have some scene before you. You might have some shelf, you might have some laptop, you might have some table and stuff like that. Initially, we just focus on the laptop, take its edges, create some feature maps, store saying that this is a laptop, and then you move to some shelf, take the edges, take the gradients, club them up, and now say these are the features, or this is a feature map corresponding to, per se, a table. That is how we look in an image. An image doesn't all have a car image, right? So we'll have some other scene as well. So receptive fields will help you to localize the image and then train your CNN. If you take, there are networks which take the image at one shot as well, but they are developed on this idea itself. So basically, we look at one part of the image called the receptive field, and then we train our feature maps, and we say these feature maps correspond to this part of the image. And so now, if I get a feature map after doing all this convolution pooling and then which I'll explain, after all these things, we'll get a feature map, right? The feature map will actually tell me if there is a window or not. I mean, like a mirror or not, because we are taking a area in the mirror area, right? So with the feature map will look like a mirror. So whenever I excite the feature map excites, right, meaning that there is a mirror in the whole image. That is how it happens. So this receptive field is a sliding window. You can move throughout the whole image and then get multiple feature maps and accumulate them as a big feature map. You got me? So that is how we do it. So now let's see, why do we do convolution? Why do we do pooling? Why do we flattening and the dense layer, whatever you see? Why are we doing each of the steps that we're doing? So basically, convolution is majorly misunderstood because when you say convolution, right, in physical terms as well, convolution is actually bringing two things together. When you say convolution, it's actually convoluting one object with some other object. That is what convolution actually means. But when you say a convolution in convolutional neural network, everyone says that it's a dot product. Someone say that it's element multiplication and stuff like that. And yeah, that's pretty much true in math terms. When you take this filter, right, when you take this filter, when you convolute with this point, it is just a dot product, 1 into 0, minus 1 into 0, minus 1 into 1, minus 1 into 0, and all that. So you get 3, you get minus 2. So that is what you get when you convolute this filter with this input image. And that is not all about convolution. Convolution is actually done to see if there is a part in that image. So when you have a feature map, right? So I'm saying this feature map, I'm just using this term feature map repeatedly, right? So this feature map is something called a kernel. So it's we can call it a filter, we can call it a kernel, we can also call it a feature map. Feature map is used when you have a end, you have this filter at the end layer. But yeah, you can use all these terminologies repeatedly. So this kernel is actually something which lets you find something in the image. So if this kernel, right, this kernel has negative inputs on the lower triangle, negative inputs on the higher triangle, and positive inputs along the diagonal, meaning it is finding a diagonal in the image. Am I clear saying that? So this filter is actually letting you find if there is a diagonal in the image. Simple as that. So this convolution might have different meanings when you talk about different data, but now we're talking about image data and we're talking about convolution neural networks here. A filter in a convolution neural network is actually finding something in the image. So if you have trained the network and then you have a feature map at the end of it, and the feature map is corresponding to some mirror portion of it, a rear view mirror portion of the car, then this feature map can again be used while testing for finding if the car has a mirror or not. Simple as that. So all these things will excite. So when you do convolution, right? So if see, it's not this diagonal. It is a it's not a left diagonal. It's a right diagonal actually. So when you do to convolute this thing, right, you get a negative output, meaning that you didn't find what you're looking for. So you're looking for a left diagonal, which is this, and all other things are negative as you see, because we are saying we don't want that regions. We only want a gradient which is going in the left direction, and we searched for it, and we were actually looking at an area which has a edge towards the right region. This is the edge that we're seeing in the image. Think this whole matrix is an image. Okay, don't think it as some bunch of numbers and which have no meaning. So this thing is a right side diagonal, and you see this is a left side diagonal. When you match both of them, you get a negative output, meaning that it is not finding a left side diagonal over there. And when you see this part, right, when you see the one part that we have heavy correlation when you say convolution, right, when you get something called correlated weights. So this correlated weights is very high in this region, and this region, right? They're all positive. So why is this positive? And this came up when this filter was actually convoluted with this part of the whole thing. When you convolute with this kernel, right, it is actually looking for a left diagonal. It actually has a left diagonal. So when you have what you're looking for, it fires up really, really well. The reason why we use convolution will help you find out if there is something in the image or not in just a snap. So in this part of the image, this is an input image. Okay, this is not a matrix. So if you have an input image, when you convolute it, there is a left side diagonal, and it says I found a left side diagonal in this part of the region. And when you see in the middle center also, right, in center also we have a left side diagonal. It says I found it. In the left, in the bottom region also, you could find a positive output saying that I could find the left diagonal. So meaning that if you're trying some feature map, we are learning the feature map, we are populating the weights through back propagation, we're actually seeing if it is there or not in the test image. That is why we use convolution. That is a major reason why we use convolution. It's not just something that we have to do, and people also omit it. They omit it after the first layer. They do multiple poolings and then they again do convolution. So it is all mixed up. It's not that you have to do convolution pooling. You can also do a major pooling and then convolution, and major pooling again then convolution. Simple as that. And once you do convolution, you have to do convolution to all the layers. It's not just you do it to red layer and red channel and then you leave it. So image comes as a box, right? Image comes as a box. The width into height into the number of channels it possesses. If it's a grayscale image, it is just one. But if it is a RGB image, you have 3 channels. So you have to do it. You have to satisfy all the 3 things, right? So you have to bring in that weight filter, then you have to convolute it through each of these things, and then you get something again called a feature map, because it's a box again. The reason why you always see boxes. So let's just quickly go through convolution, then we'll go to pooling again. So if you see this thing, right, so say we are searching for this edge in the whole image. Okay, this is the edge that you're looking for. A feature map for such such a shape will look like this: 30, 30, 30, 30. So this itself is forming a shape, isn't it? And all things are zeros, because we are not interested in any of these regions. We're looking for an edge which tilts towards the right, moving vertically. And our feature map, after this is after training. After training, will should look like 30, 30, 30, and on a gradient scale. So this is a feature map corresponding to this feature. Simple as that. And you can also when you try to replace this feature, every pixel, if 0 you have to give it as white, and if it is 225 you have to give it as black. If you just assign such things and you just look the same image as each now considering each grid as a pixel, you get the same what you're seeing on the right. Not maybe exactly black, but you'll get somewhere around a gradient which is moving this side. So first say we are finding this curve, the same curve, and the feature map will look like something like this. Simple as that. So whatever the shape is, the feature map will look should look after the training, it should look comparably. And then when you do it with the thing, this is the image, okay, this is the image that I have taken, and this is the feature map or the filter, or you can call the kernel. This is the kernel that will let me find if there is a such kind of a turning in the whole picture. So I am convoluting this with this, and I'm getting a very large number, which is exhibitory. So that is when we say that, okay, there is such a curve in the image what you showed me. That is what it found out at the end of it. And if you see this region, right, it has something like this. So a curve of for the nose of the mouse, and then it is going like this, the same the very edge that I'm showing you. So this is the input image. Now when you convolute it, am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah. So when I convolute it with the feature map, the same feature map, which is actually finding this wala curve, it gives me 0, complete 0, because there is all zeros here, right? So it will give me 0 or a negative value, basically saying that the edge that you're looking for is not in this part of the image. That is why we do convolution. We're just finding things when you do convolution. And then pooling. So when you try a classifier, right, it should not be it should be scale invariant. When you talk about scale invariance, it's just like if you see this is a big car, and then this is the same car in a smaller scene, and then this is very smaller car comparatively, isn't it? But when you train a classifier which classifies, or a detector which detects a car as an object, it should detect cars of all sizes. It should not be like a car should have this length. It should not fix that car will be of this length in any image, because if you take an image from farther distance, if the image plane is far away from the subject, you'll definitely have the image the subject being very small. So when you see this amount of car as well, it should draw a bounding box around it and say it is a car. You should not say that this doesn't look like a car, this is some toy car or something. You should not say that. So the reason why so how do we achieve this scale invariance? How do we train a neural network which is independent on the scale of the object? So whenever you show a picture of a car and say this is a car, you should understand that whatever size it might be in, whatever orientation it might be in, whatever 3D pose it might be in, it still is a car, is what it has to learn. And how do you train that? You train that on multiple views of the same car. So you show different angles of the car, you show this is still a car, and then it learn all the features. When you see this red regions, right, these are the activation maps. When you see red region, it has learned much features in this region, and you see blue regions, there are no much feature that it is learning in the regions. So these are called heat maps. We can also call as activation maps. So it is learning all the features of the car from all the possible 3D poses. And that is how it builds a robust 3D feature map. So whenever tomorrow a car comes in whatever angle, whatever size, or whatever orientation, it will still say I could find some features and this might probably a car. Simple as that. So to achieve this scale invariance, to achieve this rotation invariance and all that, we do pooling. Rotation invariance, we have to train it. We don't have any other way to do it. But scale invariance, it is majorly by pooling. So in pooling, what we do is to take the image, we reduce it by half each time. So it depends on the sliding factor. So if you want to reduce it by 3 times, you can reduce it. So you can make this star on the right to this size as well. Simple as that. That is all we use pooling for. When you pool this thing, right, it's something called max pooling or min pooling, which you learn. But all that takes is it just sees the greatest value in all these 3 things and says that's the value as 12. Simply we're just this is an image in the green channel, and then we are reducing it to something of this size. Simple as